Well, welcome to the MBU Football Coaches Show. My name is Guy Danoff, and I'm here joined with our head coach, Coach B. Saturday was the clash of the week for the Heart Conference, and we actually want to give them a big shout out and thank them as well as the Urban Edge Network for being here for certainly everything that happened in the pregame. I know you were part of that. I got to be part of it, athletic director as well as President Ross. Talk a little bit about that, just the significance of having just that excitement.
No, I thought it was a really good atmosphere. I mean, I wasn't a big part of the pregame show, but it was definitely neat, to see the setup and see the fans here ready to go. And I just think it's great that early on in our membership in the Heart of America, that the conference is going to recognize us and give us that opportunity to not only be part of the Clash of the Week. I think that speaks to some of where we're getting as a program, but also, to let us host it and choose that game. It was a great time. It was a good out.
It was a great atmosphere. I can tell you this, before the game started, all that was going on there was wonderful. So thank you guys for that. So let's talk about the game. The Spartans fell 41-14 versus Graceland, and kind of wanted to get your reaction to the game.
Yeah, it was frustrating. It was frustrating how a lot of fronts. I think ultimately, we got to look ourselves in the mirror and really evaluate who we are. We've got a lot of guys that put in a lot of work. So I think, as we bounce off the week of Grandview, I definitely don't feel like it was one of those situations where we were banged up or we kind of let that game beat us twice, so to speak, because I thought we had a really good week of practice. One of the things that I was actually reading it in an email from our strength coach, Jocko, and he said that that was one of the best weeks that we've had in the weight room. I thought we had a great week of practice.
Right.
I thought guys were really focused, but, I think he said it best when he said that you can do things right, put in a lot of work Monday through Friday, but if you're not dialed in on Saturday when the whistle blows, none of it matters.
Okay.
And it's about learning those lessons and as we say, stacking days, right?
Correct.
Ultimately you can study and prepare all you want for that test, but when it comes time for test time, you've got to rise up and you got to do your job. And I was very frustrated just how we played. We made a lot of mistakes that were not who I think we are. A lot of little penalties, whether it be holding penalties, false starts, that kind of stuff. That's really not been who we were, but it was who showed up on Saturday. I thought we did a good job in our discipline in regards to like not talking back, not getting into some of the extracurriculars that they were trying to bait us into. But ultimately we just weren't good enough on either side of the ball, and we got to look ourselves in the mirror and get better.
So, Coach, again, for the prep this week, I actually looked at all the film on them, so I knew them very extensively. For my opinion, I want you to react to it, but it didn't seem like they did really anything out of the ordinary. In other words, I think, you guys knew what they were going to do, and they just did it. Maybe other than on the defensive side, I think they brought a lot more pressure, certainly tried to disrupt Jones at the quarterback position, sometimes bringing the corner, sometimes stacking the A gaps and bringing 5 people on the rush. But outside that, it looked like they were just doing what they've been doing. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I mean, I think our coaching staff does a great job of weekly preparing our players.
Yeah.
And, one of the things that we've all got to be accountable for is then taking that game plan and executing the game plan. I think on our offense, there was times where we were just not sustaining a block, a half second longer, and it becomes a big play. We had some uncharacteristic drops, guys who've been extremely sure-handed, had some drops in some situations. Jacob's been pretty accurate.
Yeah.
He had some guys wide open. Some of them he missed. Some of them they get batted down. Those are things that happen. And we got to learn to play through them. I think from on their offensive side, they've got 2 big-time playmakers that we were well aware of.
Right.
Unfortunately, we've got a lot of inexperience in the secondary, and they took advantage of that whether it be through penalties, whether it be through, just not doing our job and missing assignments and giving up big plays. So, those things obviously are things that we discussed this morning in our team meeting, in our film session. And ultimately, I think we've got a lot of talent, but we've got to figure out who are going to be the guys that are going to go out and consistently do things at a high enough level to be successful. Right now, it's really I'm going to speak defensively, intermittent, right? And I think that kind of showed on Saturday in all phases, and even on special teams. We give up the kick return for a touchdown. It gets called back. Fortunately, that they got a penalty on that. But offensively, defensively, we did things very, very well at times. But there are also just not enough of that consistent, high effort, high energy doing our job.
Yeah, let's talk about some of the bright spots, though, because there was, as you just talked about, there were several. Jacob Jones was 15 for 30, 183 yards passing, 76 yards rushing. Again, another great stat line for him. Calvin Griffin, the 40-yard touchdown reception late. I think that was a wheel run. That was one of the best runs I've ever seen. Yeah, he broke through 5 or 6 tackles down within like 20 yards. Clean crosses by. That was a beautiful run that he had. Then the last one is Gavin Cloud. I'm just going to say it right now. He is performing certainly at all conference level, as he had another team high 6 catches, 80 yards, and yet another touchdown. And that actually now makes it to where he's got 3 consecutive games with touchdowns. Now, what I thought was kind of fun, call it the razzle dazzle. Tell us about Jared Stewart and what he did on that Gavin Cloud touchdown.
Yeah, so that was a play that we worked out throughout the week, where we tossed the ball to Jay Stu coming out of the backfield, and then Gavin comes off like he's blocking and releases.
Yep.
Coach Eck called it at a great time. Jared did a tremendous job of getting the ball off. Because he had a lot of pressure in his face and took a shot as he threw it. But Gavin was wide open. In fact, he was standing in the end zone, kind of looking around as the ball was coming. Couldn't believe he was so wide open. But no, they did a great job of executing that. They did, proud of all those guys and their stat lines. I think the biggest thing is that we've got to finish plays, and I think one of the things that I'm never going to do is, gloss over things that we can't get better at. And Calvin made a tremendous run, but he did that by himself. We got to get guys downfield blocking. We got to get guys running and getting a block that might spring him for a touchdown to where he doesn't have to make 6 guys miss on his own, because that's not always going to happen. Gavin has tremendous stats, tremendous catches, is a tremendous player. But again, wide receivers got to be involved in the run game. We've got to take more pride in that aspect, and those are all things that we're stressing for the big time.
Well, let's talk about the defense. Let's start with Justin Lane.
Justin Lane,
yeah. He forced 2 fumbles and recovered 1.
Yeah, he's really playing at a high level.
Yeah,
he really is. He's a freshman from St. Pius X. Tremendous young freshman. Tremendous. And he is a guy that we just keep talking about, that we got to find ways to get him on the field more. He's on almost every special team. He's on, he's going to start playing a lot on defense. He had a great stat line.
Yep.
The thing I want to call him out for, and I said this in front of the team, I say this all the time, is this guy doesn't just show up on Saturday. Like every single day that we have a practice, he is flying around making plays. And that is something that we are struggling with as a young team, is learning how to practice at a high enough level.
Right.
But he does it day in and day out, and there's no wonder he comes out and makes great plays.
Well, let's talk about Javon Huff. He had a big interception before halftime. Let's just be honest, Coach. That was a very key interception to give you guys a chance to put some more points on the board. But talk about that, because that was kind of a momentum shifter, because knowing that you're going to get the ball to start the third quarter.
Yeah, no, I thought all of those guys played that situation really well. We've got another deal where we put, Gavin, and we put Isaiah Hamilton in. We call it jump personnel. We put it in for a Hail Mary type situation.
Right.
Herman Burke suggested we do it. I kind of wanted to bring pressure there and make sure that they didn't have all day to sit back there. Unfortunately, we didn't get home in time on the pressure, and so they were able to get it down there. But I thought all those guys played it well. Javon did a great job of going up and attacking the ball, and made a nice play on that.
So one of the other storylines, so we got 2 of them. Number 1 was the weather, which started as a picture-perfect day, turned into lightning storms. And talk a little bit about that, because we had 2 delays. Eventually, second delay, the game was called with, I believe, but there's still 12 minutes left in the fourth quarter. So what was that like, how to navigate that, especially when you had the first delay, which is at least an hour long, and what that's like when you're sitting and you guys just kind of sitting around?
Well, it's something that it's hard to practice, of course, but it's something where, we were just trying to keep the guys loose.
Right.
It was a weird situation because you really didn't see the lightning. It was still sunny. There wasn't any clouds around.
Right.
But we had lightning within that perimeter, and it just one strike after another.
Right.
So just really trying to get him in the weight room, keep on moving, keep on stretched out, getting snacks in them, that kind of stuff, and relaxing as much as possible, taking advantage of making some changes that we saw that we could take advantage of during that time. But it's just about keeping your composure, staying focused, and I did think that they handled that pretty well. We came out of there, obviously didn't convert on that third down that we had, but that's a really tough situation to come out in a third down. So we really wanted to make sure that we were letting them kind of get back into the flow of things, and not trying to force something right away.
So with that, one of the things I talked about on the pregame show, and it was this, Coach, is that coming in the game, the Spartans, well, they were averaging 44 yards of penalties coming in, as opposed to Graceland was averaging 99. Now, the stat line on the penalties is something this is not a typo, and I can't believe I'm reading this, but here you go. There are lots of penalties to the tune of Graceland had 14 of them for 199 yards, and MBU had 9 of them for 130, which certainly, for both teams, certainly, stalled some drives. But I want to talk to you about specifically the Spartans. Can't worry about what they did. But in terms of when you look at that stat line, 9 for 130, what are you talking to your team about this week?
Well, I don't know the exact breakdown, but I would say 4 that I can think of, 4 of those blinded penalties, maybe 5 of them were related to somebody in the secondary.
Okay.
Either a defensive holding, a pass interference, something like that.
Right.
I know there's 4 that I can think of off the top of my head. So we obviously have to be much better at playing the ball. I think it's something that, and I'm going to say it transparently on air, just like I said it to the team, is that coaches are going to go to the refs ahead of the game, tell them these guys cannot play the ball in the air. Every time the ball's in the air, they're going to hold, they're going to grab, and that is going to affect. So what's going on is that the coaches are just throwing up the ball on third down long, knowing that they're probably going to get a penalty.
Gotcha.
So obviously that's something we've been working on. It's a point of emphasis. It's going to be the guys that can do that the best that are going to be on the field. And, that kind of thing from the secondary is inexcusable. Now, I also feel like there was some that are a little bit questionable in calls.
Sure.
But at the end of the day, we've got to look ourselves in the mirror and say that, 9 penalties for 130 yards, as you mentioned, something that we talked about today, either extended drives or killed drives.
Correct.
And that's what I mean by us not being very disciplined in how we handled the game. That's really not who we've been. We're not a very high penalized team, but it rose up in the wrong situations.
Okay, well, let's move forward now. You're going to take on number 12, MidAmerica Nazarene in Olathe, Kansas. Olathe, thank you. Olathe, Kansas. And another big road test. And right now they are 3-1. They just got knocked off, actually 34-31 versus Wellington Penn University. So what are you telling your team is now you go to take on yet another top 20 ranked team?
Well, we got to start working harder. We had a great week of preparation, but we need some guys that are going to fight. That's what I told them. There's a time in that game where, I was about as animated as I've ever been, because I was to the point where if I could have taken somebody's helmet and gone in and played, I wanted to go in and play. Because I was sick and tired of guys just kind of letting things happen. And there has to be a line in the sand. And that's kind of where we're at. We have to draw a line in the sand and say we're better than what we're shown.
Right.
And that's our job as coaches, to get them to understand that. But we are a much better football team than what we showed on Saturday. We're a much better football team than what we showed in the first half against Grandview. So we've got to get guys that are going to go in and start doing it the way that they're coached to do it. When the whistle blows, we tell them this all the time, right? You're going to sink to the level of your preparation rather than rise to the occasion.
Yep.
But we spend a lot of time preparing them at a very high level. And when you sit them down and say, is this something you didn't see? Did you not know what to do? No, we knew what was coming. Well, then we've got to start doing our job. We've got to help them. We probably got to simplify a little bit. So defensively, I know, offensively, simplify a little bit so we can play a little bit faster and with a little bit more confidence. So that's where we're going to start. But at the end of the day, we got to find guys that are going to go out and battle. And this is a team that we feel like we can beat. William Penn is just showed, right, that they knocked them off this past week, and William Penn's a good football team. But when I look at our schedule, we knew this going in. I said it to the team day one. I've said it to you during fall camp.
Right.
Is that this is going to be a team that we have to have mental toughness, because it's a much different schedule. We have some top teams going into the bye week. Well, now if you look at where standings are, and again, I said this morning at our team meeting, MidAmerica is going to drop a little bit, but they were ranked number 12. They lost to William Penn, who we played the first week after the bye week. They're receiving votes. They'll probably be in the top 25 this week. After William Penn, or after MidAmerica, we play number 3. Then we play William Penn, who will probably be in the top. Then we play Baker, who's receiving votes.
Right.
So it's not getting any easier. Now, can we win all those games? Absolutely. But the team that we put out there Saturday that's going to go out and wade into things at tippy toe and not do what they're coached to do, it's going to be a long year. If we can get on track, start getting back to who we were in week 1, doing the little things, running, playing with great effort, playing with great energy, watch out.
Absolutely. And, Coach, could you give us just a little comparison of what you see, certainly, with MidAmerica Nazarene, kind of compare them maybe with Graceland. We knew they had the 2 really talented wide receivers. We knew they were going to throw the ball a ton, which they did. No surprises there. And certainly, have a good back in Minor who can certainly run the ball too. Kind of give us a little bit on the matchup side. What do you think this game will be like? Yeah,
I think we're a little early into it. I think their strength this year is defensively. I think they're a really well-coached defense. Their defensive coordinator is now the head coach. Their head coach left and took a job at Southwest Baptist, but he's now the head coach. I'm sure he's still heavily involved. They're very well coached. They run. They're physical. They're going to present some matchup issues that we've got to be able to take advantage of. I think, honestly, offensively, just early on in the film study, they're not as talented as what they were offensively a year ago. They had, a guy who was player. They had played first-team all-conference guy at quarterback. They had 2 first-team all-conference wide receivers that were dynamic, with another guy that was a slot that was very dynamic. They had a really good offensive line, really good running back. They lose some of those pieces. Their quarterback's not back. They lose a couple of their wide receivers.
Right.
The tight end is gone. So I do think that there's some opportunities there for us that we may not have to give as much help to the secondary. But they're still very well coached. They're gonna come out. They're gonna be physical. They're gonna want to go prove themselves after coming off a loss, and so we've got to be ready to go.
Absolutely. So, what's your final message to Spartan Nation to get them to check out the live stream, because we'll be going live on the Spartan Digital Network at 1:00 on Saturday?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is we appreciate their support, and we've got to do a better job of going out and putting a better product out there. But that's our goal. We're going to be there. We know it's a tough road ahead. But at the end of the day, all of these teams are very beatable. We just got to get back to being who we are and put on a great show for the Spartan fans, because they come out and support us.
Yes, they do. I want to say thank you again for this past weekend. Spartan Nation again showed up and showed out. So you've been watching all right here on the MBU Football Coaches Show. Again, for Coach B, I'm Guy Danoff. Thank you for tuning in to the Spartan Digital Network.